So happy Chanukah.
Happy Chanukah.
This class will be about Chanukah, and we're going to understand what a interesting piece in relationship to a teaching which comes out of actually the idea behind Chanukah and how we operate with Chanukah. The Gemara writes regarding the mitzvah of lighting the menorah on Chanukah that in fact there is 3 ways or 3 options which you can fulfill this obligation and fulfill the mitzvah of lighting candle. And there's a very basic way to light a candle, that is a single candle. And you can do that single candle for every day for the entire duration of the holiday. And if someone wishes to do the mitzvah in a more beautiful way, there's another option, and that other option is given as to light a candle for every person in his house every night. That is to say that if there is, for instance, 3 people in your household, then you would light 3 candles, but every night, doing exactly the same way, 1 candle per person. And then the Gemara, the discussion within the Talmud suggests that if a person wants to go in the best way, and the expression that's used is mahadran or mahadran. If somebody wants to do it in the most carefulest, one imbued with the most of goodness, the 3rd most beautiful way to do the mitzvah is to do every night for every and for the community, for the family, but an additional candle every night. And therefore, on the first night you light 1 candle, the second night you add on another candle the second night, and for the 3rd till the 8th night, the final night of Chanukah, where you've got 8 candles lit. Now that the Gemara calls and gives that as an idea as called mahadran or mahadran, meaning the most beautifulest way, the best way to fulfill the mitzvah is mahadran or mahadran. Now what's happened is that the communities of Israel over time have accepted upon themselves to do it in that best way, what is considered mahadran or mahadran, and the entire community of Israel, without exception, have adopted this category of fulfilling the mitzvah in the mahadran or mahadran method in the best way. Now that's interesting, because when we discuss the different levels of fulfilling mitzvahs in general, we don't find that everybody, or it's the community, or it is the custom of all Jews to fulfill mitzvahs in that fullest manner, in that mahadran and mahadran methodology. And therefore, the mitzvah of Chanukah, of lighting the candles, seems different or set apart or has taken on an aspect that Chanukah and menorah is in the first instance always done the best way. That is to say, other mitzvahs have the idea where there are at least 2 variations the way they are instituted. That is to say, there is the basic component of the mitzvah, and then there is a more what we call in our tradition more beautiful. It is nicer, or we call it going an extra step. But the Gemara terms in relationship to Chanukah, it calls it the term mahadran, and it says mahadran umahadran is mahadran mina mahadran. It calls it the best of the best, or the ones who go extra, but in the best way with a double expression, and that is considered the best way to do it. And then this option of the third option of the third way, because the Gemara gives the basic one, or gives a second option, which is Mahadran, which is called good. And that's normally the expression that's used if you want to take any mitzvah to its next stage. But the menorah is given this attribute of called Mahadran, Mahadran mina Mahadran. That is to say, the best of the best. And in our generations, everybody's adopted this Mahadran mina Mahadran option when it comes to Chanukah. Now, that's a very interesting point to think about and examine. So, with regard to other mitzvahs, the vast majority of people are happy to fulfill their obligation by fulfilling it the way that it's established and in its simplest form. And normally, there's only a select few who choose to perform any mitzvah in a stricter manner. But with regards, as we said, with regards to menorah, it has now become totally accepted within all the communities that we have to do menorah in the mitzvah in the most beautifulest way, in the way of what we call Mahadran Mahadran. Now, why might that be? And how perhaps we can come to an understanding which relates to it. So in order to understand that a little bit more, we have to think about a little bit about the history of what happened and how Chanukah got established. We celebrate Chanukah to commemorate, in fact, two miracles, there were a number of miracles, but two main miracles that occurred during that time. Number one, and as expressed in our prayer that we add in Shemona Esrei and in benching when we say grace after meals, we mention the miracle of the Maccabees' victory over a mighty Greek a mighty army. We call it the Greek army. That being one of the mitzvah. And the other mitzvah that the other miracle that we discuss is the miracle of finding the small cruse of oil, that little bit of oil that miraculously burnt, the amount of oil that should have burnt only for one day, miraculously burnt for 8 consecutive days. And as a remembrance to the miracle that Hashem performed for the Maccabees, we mention that in our prayers, and we have the institution of the menorah and Chanukah lightings. The rabbis instituted that the Jewish people should praise Hashem every year on Chanukah, and that's why we add in Hallel and the extra prayer and the extra mention, the extra prayer in Shemona Esrei to remember the victory, the army victory, as well as the candle. But as a remembrance of the miracle of the oil, we actually light the menorah. Now, what's special about the lighting of the menorah is it's that particular one that we refer to as Mahadran or Mahadran, and not to the Hallel or to the davening that we do. And we can understand why, and we can investigate, and we'll think about why this should be, and we can contrast this with other customs being established. So in order to understand this idea, we have to think a little bit more about our mitzvahs in general and how we operate with mitzvahs, and that we reflect, and that will reflect also how Hashem exhibits his presence in the world, because after all, we are celebrating what happened in a miracle. So if we examine the difference between the miracle of the victory and the miracle which happened with the oil, right, we can understand with that the way that Hashem operates in the world, and how, and the nature of Hashem's presence in the world. So one way Hashem runs in the world is a standard operating procedure which we have adopted a Western the Western expression of this is the rules of nature. Really, that the sun shines every single day, that the sun comes up every day, we call that nature, but really that's a miracle in itself. That the world continually exists, we take it for granted. All the health benefits and all the other different activities that happen in our world, we call that nature. We call that Hashem rules by sound of nature. And even though that's Hashem operating and it's a miracle in its sense, we don't really openly call that a miracle. Then there's a second means which Hashem runs the world, and that's my miracles, which are beyond what we've just defined as nature, and they are above the natural order. That is to say, when something special happens, and according to the standard rules of nature, it shouldn't have happened, but Hashem has shown himself in this world, and he changes the order of the world, and that's what we call a miracle. That is, he changes the nature of the world and produces a miracle. So, for example of that, we could say that is the victory of the Maccabees, because the Maccabees were a small band of men. They weren't trained army people. They were essentially a small and weak army, and they were successful against a very larger contingency of the other army, the occupying forces, which were occupying them at the time, which technically they were what we call the Syrian Greeks, a Syrian contingency that was under the auspice of the Greek Empire. But they had all the correct tools, all the correct armaments. They had the latest technology in terms of mighty warring. For instance, the latest technology of the time were tanks. What were the tanks? They were elephants running around as a team. So that the Maccabees won, that was a miracle in that it shouldn't have happened, but it did. After all, the Maccabees were groups of Torah scholars who became warriors. But then there is the third method which Hashem operates in the world, and that's another way which is beyond even nature. We can call that a miracle of the even transcending miracles. Miracles in general are occurrences which don't necessarily happen. Hashem might change the course of history for the Jewish people in a physical sense or a spiritual sense. But then there is a third manner of happening, which is so wondrous that it's a matter of extra, something totally beyond any sense of even a miraculous expectation. And the example of that is the miracle of finding the pure oil, which, even though it was unnecessary, it didn't really have to happen, because our halacha, our laws are such that even if under those circumstances, when the Maccabees took over the temple, and while they were still fighting the Greeks, but they had taken over the temple, they could have, under those extraordinary circumstances, they were allowed to, according to the halacha, according to the law, to use the impure oil. But Hashem performed a miracle and a special level of kindness to find, so that the kohen, so that people could actually find this oil. And this is an expression of Hashem's deep love for the Jewish people. So if we understand that, with that understanding that we've just said, that there are three classes of miracle: natural order, a miracle which goes beyond nature, but then there's a miracle which goes even beyond a miracle, right? And that was expressed by the oil. We can understand and find a solution to our understanding of the issue which relating to the oil, because everything that happens everything happens in a spiritual sense, is a reaction to a similar occurrence that happens in our world. Therefore, we can assume that these three types of miracles come because of our natural order that we, the Jewish nation, present ourselves to Hashem. As we say, a mirror, your face mirrors your response. When I look into a mirror, I see whatever I put into the mirror, I see that's what comes back. And that also happens in relationship to godliness. When I do some things in a certain spirit, Hashem responds in somewhat of a similar spirit. So within the natural order of things, the natural order response that the Hashem gives us to the regular people is in that when Jews regularly fulfill their duties to learn Torah mitzvahs as required, Hashem fulfills what he says in the Chumash, what he says in our Shema, that if you fulfill my statutes, my commandments, I'll give you rain in the proper time, as the example. I'll give you parnasa. I'll give you your outcomes. However, and that's the natural order. When you plant, you'll reap produce. Produce will come out from the land. But that's the natural order. Just like you expect it to rain, and it will rain, and you will get and you'll be able to plant your crop, and you'll get your reward for what you put in. That's what you get out. But then there is another level. There is when a person prays very strongly, and he asks Hashem for a miracle. That's an outcome. That's an outcome when the Jewish people are not necessarily just satisfied with merely fulfilling their obligation and getting and doing the bare minimum, but they want to go beyond. They want to beautify the idea of they want to beautify their mitzvah. And when the Jewish people act as in that sort of manner, going beyond their level of requirement of what they're to do, then Hashem responds also with them, going beyond nature. And therefore producing a miracle. But then there's the third manner, which even transcends miracles and comes through the Jewish people committing themselves in a total and very strong manner with the idea of self-sacrifice, what we call in Hebrew Mesiras Nefesh, going beyond the level of miracle, but going beyond the feeling of just making something better, beautifying mitzvahs, making nice, but even going beyond, going to the ultimate extent. So according to those three levels of miracles, that's in response to the three levels that the Jewish nation treats Hashem. One standard, one going beautifying, going beyond, and then one going to the ultimate extent of Mesiras Nefesh. And that's what happened, in the time of Chanukah. And there is this great advantage of going at this level of Mesiras Nefesh over the Aveda over the second level of calling Hidur. When a Jew feels that he actually is getting pleasure and he really wants to fulfill Hashem's wants, and he goes with his entire might, right? He goes beyond b'chol modecho, as we say in the Shema, from all your might, but he goes to his fullest being. He goes not just b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, but he goes b'chol modecho. He even goes to the highest level, to the level of Mesiras Nefesh. This arouses with him an idea to do the mitzvah in its most beautiful sense, and then Hashem responds to him in that self-same manner. So if you do mitzvahs like a servant, just because you're commanded, then you get a response. If you do something because you're a servant, for instance, that wants to do things really nicely for your master, for the one you're serving, for your friend, and you're going beyond, you get a very nice response from your friend from the mirror. But if you go the fullest that you can without any preconditions and going you to a manner which transcends things in the ultimate way, then Hashem rewards you in in a way of going beyond. So that when a person does self-sacrifice, then he himself is no longer the person that's doing, he's put himself aside. And it's now and then it's a matter of Hashem. And he feels that all he's doing is because he wants to fulfill the Ratzon, the will of his companion, of Hashem, of the one that he's serving. He doesn't feel that he needs to be the leader and he's doing it because he's the leader. He might be standing up, or the one who's having to speak in a circumstance, and he's saying he's the doer, he's the speaker, or he's the one who does it. He doesn't necessarily need the honor of it. He just wants to get the matter accomplished because this is what Hashem wants. When a person behaves in such a manner and goes completely beyond, that's his only objective, then Hashem will reward him generously, and into the ultimate way. And then Hashem will bless him in a manner which goes beyond the level of ordinary nature. Now that's what happened in Chanukah time. In Chanukah time, during the time of Chanukah, when the Jewish people stood strong with the ultimate self-sacrifice, Hashem in turn showed them the wonders that went beyond what was required. Not only did they win the war, the physical war, but they went beyond themselves. So Hashem translated that answer in a way of light, in a way of spirituality, so that a little candle, which represents the light of all the generations, represents the light of Torah, which represents the light of Torah, that stood strong and showed itself that it went beyond one day, even though the requirement is just simply one per day. That sounds like nature. Then you can go one for each one of the family, and you get a miraculous response. But if you go one on top of the other and showing light, so that when the Jewish people stood strong with the ultimate self-sacrifice, Hashem in turn showed them wonders of spirit, and that spirit is represented by the light, by the menorah, and Hashem went away. And that's why the Jewish nation have adopted the most beautiful way of doing the mitzvah of a menorah. For the menorah represents the miracle in which all limitations and calculations are disregarded, and a person goes beyond and goes to the level of not just beyond good, not just beyond of the basic of doing, and not just beyond Mahadran, but a person goes to the most beautiful level called Mahadran or Mahadran. And with that, I wish everyone, I wish you, and I wish everyone enjoyable, happy, and great Chanukah, and experience all the pleasures of Chanukah.